Thanks. And thanks to Deputy Bacic for bringing forward this important bill on Dublin Bay. And for my part, as a Dunleary TD, in one of the counties that adjoins the Dublin Bay area, and for whom Dublin Bay is a very important, precious resource and amenity, we're happy to support the bill and what it's trying to achieve, and the focus it's trying to put on having a joined up, coherent focus on protecting the bay as an amenity, as a precious resource of biodiversity, as a swimming area, and for all the many other attributes that the bay has. And I think I can safely say I'm also saying that on behalf of the Save Our Seafront campaign, of which I'm chairman, and a group that also have been campaigning for many, many years around bay-related and seafront-related issues in Dublin Bay. So I'm very glad to support it. Obviously, we need to sort of tease through all of the detail, but I'm sure Deputy Bacic is open to that. The point is that the general principle is right. We need to have some body that is genuinely representative of all stakeholders, all those who have a real interest in protecting the bay, enhancing it, protecting it as an amenity, its biodiversity, representing the various stakeholders in the bay, and ensuring the water quality is the best that it possibly can be, and that it has real power and teeth, and critically that it is genuinely representative of all stakeholders. So I think that is the key. I just want to then go on from that, I suppose, to just flag a few issues that I think are important in that regard, and that have been the preoccupation of the Save Our Seafront campaign, some of them for very many years. And I would like to just commend the Save Our Seafront campaign for its work. We first were set up, I think, in 2004. We've been still a great standing committee that's been very active all of those years. Some of its leading members have passed on. I remember the very first meeting we had was in the Christian Institute in Dunleary, and it was attended by John de Courcy Ireland, and he was one of the founding members of Save Our Seafront. A fantastic, a mariner, a socialist, a lover of the sea and the harbour, and somebody who'd campaigned indeed for many years even before Save Our Seafront, and somebody who should be long remembered for the passion he had for marine and maritime related issues. I think a further commemoration, frankly, of John de Courcy Ireland would be something we should think about in Dunleary and elsewhere. Bob O'Dell, I think the founding member, certainly one of the for a long time leading figure in the Sandycove and Glasstool Residents Association, was on the committee of Save Our Seafront, and was a real voice in that campaign over a number of related bay issues. But that campaign began over something that has been alluded to by Deputy Bacic in her contribution, was over the issue of Dunleary Baths. And I think the story of Dunleary Baths is illustrative of both the dangers and the potentials for developing our seafront and Dublin Bay amenities. Because when the campaign was first set up, there was incredibly a plan backed by the majority of political parties and Dunleary Rathdown County Council at the time for a 19-storey office block to be built on the site of Dunleary Baths. Just think about it, a 19-storey office block. And we were set up and campaigned. I remember our first protest, I'd say we had about 30 people there when we began. It was no, I wasn't. But from small things, important things often grow. And we built up that campaign against that horrific proposal. And then subsequently, there was another proposal for a 10-storey apartment block. And if you ever go down to Dunleary just east of the East Pier, if you like, the entire area from Teddy's Ice Cream to the East Pier would now be blocked out from the main road if that proposal had gone forward. But at the time, we mobilised thousands and thousands of people in a huge series of demonstrations, culminating in a massive demonstration there in Scotsman's Bay. Christy Moore played, we had many other artists, we had people up from the Shell to Sea campaign, other sea-related campaigns at the time speaking, and that mass movement of people power forced the abandonment of that proposal. And that was a huge, huge victory for people power. At the time, the central argument we had to take on is you have to have public-private partnership. In other words, in the development of the harbour, the seafront amenities, there has to be, private capital has to be in there somewhere. And the trade-off for getting anything on the seafront is some private interest has to make money. Hence, we've got to have a hotel, we've got to have an apartment block, or we've got to have an office block in order to get a swimming pool or to get some sort of amenity. And we rejected that because we knew once you accepted that principle, you were effectively privatising the seafront, and what you would get would benefit private investors and very wealthy people and not actually protect the amenity as a public amenity for all. And that is the critical thing about Dublin Bay. It has to be amenity for all. The seafront is an amenity for all. It's not something that ever should be the province of an exclusive group of people or people who are simply trying to exploit it for money. It is a quite incredible thing that we are now 16 or 17 years on, and we finally, next week, the Dún Laoghaire Baths that we campaigned for and that we got agreement for in principle will reopen as a public amenity without apartment blocks, without office blocks, but still without the pool. Still without the pool that we campaigned for. Shockingly, I mean, they've left a space for it, but still no pool. There'll be a swimming jetty, and it's great, and it's far better than privatisation, but it is extraordinary that after all those years, we still will not have the swimming pool. And again, I remember at the time when we argued against those mad proposals and said we should have a public seawater swimming amenity, we were told, oh, seawater swimming is completely out of date now. People only swim in, they'll only swim in heated pools. That was one of the main objections at the time. I mean, talk about how wrong can you be? Where seawater swimming has now exploded. A massive, massive interest. But anyway, we're nearly there, but we still want our pool. And the point is that the belief that you had to somehow exploit the seafront for money was the thing that threatened it as a public amenity. And that brings me on to a few other issues, right? We all know we need offshore industrial wind to have alternative sources of electricity. But it is completely wrong that private for-profit developers have selected the sites for the development of that rather than a democratic planning process or something like a Dublin Bay authority. So, for example, the private developers have selected the Kish Bank, a very sensitive area within a UNESCO or adjoining a UNESCO biosphere, which could very seriously and detrimentally affect Dublin Bay as an amenity from all sorts of points of view. That should be done in a democratic and planned and sustainable, environmentally sustainable way. It shouldn't be private developers dictating where wind farms go. And I want to flag that as still a very, very important issue for the people of Dún Laoghaire, and I suspect of all of Dublin Bay. Dún Laoghaire Harbour is another absolutely precious resource, and Save Our Seafront campaigned for many, many years to have the dissolution of the essentially commercially orientated harbour company, to have it dissolved and to have a harbour brought under democratic control, which we succeeded eventually in doing. But recently, the terminal building, the old Stella terminal building, was essentially handed over against our opposition to a private company who wanted to develop a digital hub in the terminal building. We were told in June, we opposed this because we believed it should be developed as a public amenity. We were told in June that the digital hub that was going to be developed by this private company was, quote, shovel ready as soon as it was handed over, right? Not a thing has happened to that terminal building, not a thing. And I have it on a reasonable rumour that that whole private entity is going to collapse, and we're left with a terminal building sitting in the middle of the harbour that it should be used to develop a national water sports centre, greater access to the sea, and facilitate access to that wonderful amenity which is the harbour and the bay. Very finally, in 1 minute if I can, I want to address the issue of water quality, and I want to thank Melissa Halpin for putting forward motions looking for more testing about 2 years ago of water quality. But key issues in that regard the Minister has alluded to. When it rains, foul water is mixing with rainwater, and we are getting sewage going into the sea on a regular basis because we have not done the investment in the rehabilitation of a Victorian pipe network in the area. That investment needs to happen, and the sewage treatment plant, even when it's upgraded, is still not going to be enough to deal with the capacity that is necessary to ensure water quality in Dublin Bay, and so measures urgently need to be taken in that regard.